Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Jackman Radio. I am your host, Mike Jackman, and I'm very excited today to be joined by, as always, my brother Eric and our very own state rep here in Peterborough, New Hampshire, the Honorable Jonah Wheeler, representing the 33rd District. Jonah, you have a primary coming up next week and big things, and I want to thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely, Mike and Eric. You guys have been some great friends over the course of the last 2 years, and I have been watching your show and your antics for a long time. So it's been just kind of a full circle moment for me to get to be a guest on the show and a friend of you guys. So I really appreciate you guys.
Definitely, man. Well, thanks for coming on. You see the antics and you're still going to come on. That shows you, that shows you what kind of and, getting to know you the last couple of years, like you mentioned, what's really cool is, like, here in New Hampshire, you can get to know your elected officials, and they're just real people. And I've been following, your career since you announced you were going to run. And I think you're either the youngest or one of the youngest members of the elected body in New Hampshire. Is that true?
Yes, I am the second youngest. So I got elected assuming I'm the youngest. And then I found out once elected, there was a young woman named Valerie McDonald from Salem who was 18 years old when she got elected. And she takes the crown champion as the youngest member in this last 2022 to 2024 biennium. And she's, we disagree on a number of issues, but we actually have a great relationship and have been able to work well when it comes to LIAC, which is the Legislative Youth Advisory Council, and different issues, free speech. I mean, we care about some core principles together. It's just sort of how we get there. That's where we find our differences. And it's been great to, as young people, be able to get up there and respect each other, and actually speak to one another without being that partisan butting heads.
It's really refreshing to see, to see up there. I watched the debate that you had at the library the other day with Ivy Van and Peter Leishman, and it was a very civil conversation, and you kind of touched on those themes. And, now in 2024, locally, but probably more nationally, it seems like politics has become pretty nasty and pretty vicious and personal. And I know, obviously, with some of the votes that you've done in the last year, you've faced some backlash. We can get into that later. But that's one of the things that really impresses me about your tenure in the House, is that you're willing to talk to the other side, work to get stuff done, and you're always respectful about it. And, you mentioned that you actually read the information, the literature, and the bills, which I think is also a rare thing in politics.
So, unfortunately, I think it is. I know many people up there that just vote based on what recommendation sheets, whether they come from the party or from different lobbyist groups, say. That's so sad, because you can trust somebody because you went out to dinner with them, or they're nice to you, or they're respectful to you. But especially in a place like the legislature, everybody has an agenda, and some people are open and honest about their agenda. Myself, I consider myself to be, I lay it out all on the table, and then people know who I am and where I stand. And some people, they're nice to everybody, and you don't know where they stand. And that is pervasive in politics today. And I have tried and I really appreciate it. I'm grateful for what you said. I have tried my hardest to be up there as a member and a representative of Peterborough and Sharon, not of Jonah Wheeler or of the Democratic Party, but of the people who elected me, and what I'm supposed to do as a legislator when I take an oath to the state constitution and the Constitution of the United States of America, which is uphold the legislation, read and write the legislation that I'm supposed to do, and uphold the Constitution, serve the people of the state of New Hampshire as I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, and it's nice to hear about you and the other state rep there you talked about who are younger, because it seems like, I ran for state rep in 2012 for a district that was Fitzwilliam and Rindge. I think it was called District 11 at the time. I can't remember 100%. It's 12 years ago. I can barely remember this past week. And it just seemed like the body was so, to be blunt, it was just on the older side. It was people who were either retirees or they're independently wealthy and they're able to do the job. Because otherwise, you gotta have income and have a means to support yourself, because the pay is like what now, a couple hundred for a term, or like plus gas.
Yep.
So it's lucrative. It's very lucrative to be a New Hampshire state
It
rep.
very much so is.
But that that was just something I found, and maybe you can speak to that a little bit too. Like, well, you're up there casting votes, and you're wheeling and dealing, and you're doing the work of the people here in our district. Do you feel that kind of like disconnect, that generational disconnect, or what does it feel like high school a little bit? I mean, what does it feel like week to week when they're in session? You guys are in session.
Well, I think that's a great descriptor for it, and I have absolutely said that before. It definitely feels like high school. There's a lot of cliques. There's a lot of petty backstabbing for personal reasons. I'm not going to vote for this because he said that to me. It has nothing to do with the text of the bill. There's a lot of that. It's a popularity contest in many ways. When it comes to the pay and how you're actually able to get it done, it's true. I mean, it's not just elderly people, but it's, wealthy retired people that are able to do the job, or you have to be crazy enough to and have a community that has the jobs available in order to hop between 5-6 different jobs over the course of a summer to save up enough money to be able to be there in the time that you need to be there from January to June. It is crazy. I mean, it's not a sustainable way to get it done. It's not an easy way. If you're someone who's looking to grow a family and have a strong base of wealth and a foundation in your 20s, don't run for the legislature. Because you won't be able to do it. There is a way. I know I'm very good with my personal budget. I know each dollar that goes in and out of my account. I mean, that's kind of the only way that I'm able to get it done. I don't have any ambiguity when it comes to revenue and expenditures on my personal budget, and you have to work very hard to balance that each month, and especially in the months when because it's funny enough, when you're that tight in the budget, the $60 a day that you get from mileage actually does help. Once that stops in July and August, you have to supplement that with working harder, and that's easier to do in the off year. But when you're working in an election, that's hard to do. When I first got elected, I was working as a education organizer in Nashua, and stopped doing that in May of 2023, and from there just started doing odd jobs and everything like that I could meet my balance each month, and work in the summer to save up enough to have that balance throughout the legislative session. We need to figure out a way that we find pay for our legislators in the budget. I mean, that just needs to happen. I don't think we should be paying our legislators like Massachusetts, but we should at least have a stipend for the days that they are there, whether that be a $50 or $100, $75 a day stipend. That would at least supplement people's budget enough to where they could work maybe 1 or 2 part-time jobs as opposed to 3 or 4, and have an ability to actually get the job.
Is that conversation happening up there, Jonah?
Well, because of people like myself, it is. I am up there passionate for that issue, and mentioned that in caucus. I mentioned that with leadership. I mentioned that with the people who I need to talk to in order to find a way to find the right path for us to get there. There's a few ways that it could happen. I think the most deliberate way that should happen is some sort of commission, blue chip commission like we have at the county level, that determines whether what the salary should be for legislators. My ideal, like I said, would be my half ideal would be some sort of $100-ish stipend a day that you're there. We have to, type a little kiosk or sign up at the speaker's office each day that we're there for our mileage. We could expand that out to be a stipend as well. When you sign your mileage form up, you're there that day, and you also get your stipend. There are conversations about that, but we need people like myself and others who are running right now. Anthony Harris, Hannah Bissix. I mean, I can name a bunch of people across the state that are running who understand the struggle of working people and how we need to get this issue across the line.
Couldn't we take some of those coffers from like the lottery or gambling in New Hampshire or something? I mean, The liquor sales, I don't know.
Legalize weed. And
There's got to be some kind of, not slush, but some kind of something. I mean,
well, the budget right now, I don't know if there's much extra money in the budget right now, but it's true. We need to find some other. I mean, we need to be finding new revenue streams, and whether that's some kind of. I mean, it has to. We have to. I mean, whether that's cannabis, whether that's something else, the state needs it. People don't like to hear that, but that is the hard truth. There are systems that are decades behind the pale of where they should be, and as a result, we're wasting money. So if we found new revenue sources, we would be able to invest, and over the course of after we invest and we actually have social services that meet the modern age and are at the very least electronically capable and not all run on paper, then I'm confident we'll be saving money in the end. And it's true when it comes to legislative pay, or when it comes to the criminal justice system or the education system. There's a few and many social services in the state that we are just inadequately funding, or poorly or inefficiently funding, that we need to be moving the dollars in the right place for those programs.
And mentioning the marijuana issue, and this did come up at the Peterborough Library debate the other night, do you think it's possible? So you get reelected, and this is an issue, obviously, that you've worked very hard on and passionately about. What do you think that would look like in your next term to try and make it happen and move it over the goalpost? Does that just depend in your mind on how many Republicans are elected, or who the governor is, or what do you think the variables are for that?
Ultimately, Mike, the variables for that are I mean, last year we saw it was a bipartisan majority which voted to table the legislation by 5 votes. And it was a purple issue where you had Republicans voting for it, Democrats voting for it, and Republicans voting against it, and Democrats voting against it. I think we'll see a similar thing happen this year. And the way that we're going to get cannabis, legalization across the line is if we actually have people up there testifying for proper cannabis legalization. I mean, the cannabis legalization that I'm looking for, if it really comes down to we need to pass it in the next biennium, and there is truly no way to pass it before this biennium ends, we have to make sure, because it's just silly otherwise, that there is home grow in that legislation, that there's private sale in that legislation, and that we're working hard on those issues in order to get that done. One of the big obstacles that we'll face is if somebody is in the corner office that doesn't support cannabis legalization. That'll make it really hard to pass the Senate. That'll make it really hard to get it signed. But it's not impossible if someone who says they don't support cannabis legalization in an election year get elected, and in the first year of the biennium, via negotiations and push and pull and leverage, are forced into signing it somehow. When we are an island of illegality, everybody recognizes that. The cops don't want to prosecute this anymore. We're wasting money when we do prosecute it, and it's just time that we let people, adults, recreationally use a substance which they are already recreationally using because they can buy it across the 4 borders that we have here, including our international border.
It's something, because a lot of my friends from out of state are like, what the hell, man? You guys live free or die? You're the only state in New England that's not on this. And Eric, I think, didn't you give Sununu a hard time when you were dressed as Trump one time about this?
Yeah, we were at the SNHU arena, and I took a couple pictures with Sununu, and I just said, and I was dressed as Trump. I said, Sununu, you're doing great on a lot of things, but quite frankly, you're terrible on the weed issue, and you need to do better.
Maybe you convinced him, otherwise, because he was going to sign the bill this year.
Yeah.
Maybe you were part of the reason that you got convinced.
Yeah. Have they done any? I mean, I haven't looked at any of the numbers. I don't know if you have, Jonah, but like, what would have been projected revenue for that? Like as a tax base to, because obviously no one wants the income tax, no one wants the sales tax. So, like you said, we got to get creative with other things and other means of revenue.
Yeah,
I can't remember any figures. I mean, I know it's kind of hard to pin that down, but there had to have been some estimates that you saw, right?
I mean, there were various estimates that were there. It's one of those things that's really hard to estimate, because the system will take at least 4 years to
Right.
get implemented. You have to spend millions of dollars to set the system up as it was written in the legislation that we had this year around cannabis, the number of which I forget at the moment. If it was just private sale, the revenue from taxes on private sale, I mean, that estimate looks different than if we have to set up 15 agency stores and spend the revenue in order to get the licensing structure and everything in order to get there. And that licensing, there's things that we're going to have to spend the money on inevitably, but it's that, when people say that cannabis could be a panacea for revenue changes in the state, that is not necessarily true. Like, we could fund education with cannabis. The revenues for cannabis aren't going to be as large as we expect them to be, just because of the market already being set up in the states bordering us, and the setup costs that it's going to take in order to get there. So it would be hard to project, if I'm being honest, just until we actually had legislation that was 100% about to be implemented and we knew what the implementation costs.
Right, and then saw it play out for a couple years, like other states who had many years ahead of us, like Colorado, where they're now able to analyze trends and forecasts and the economy based up around marijuana. I mean, God, for so many people, this is just like a no-brainer. But we'll have to see, who gets into the corner office, and then what the makeup of the body looks like, and all those variables. But we'll continue pushing for it, and
absolutely, we'll get it done. Happens in the next biennium or the next, we will get it done. I mean, it's just kind of one of those inevitable.
We do that. We could invite Jesse Ventura to come out and in front of the State House light a big fat one. This is from Minnesota. This is the body joint. It's a special one. I brought
this from Baja.
Yes.
I grew it down there. It's the Predator strain. Yeah, that issue it's a no-brainer. But another issue too, I've seen in some ads locally here in New Hampshire, and I think you may have touched on it the other night. But what's kind of the skinny on this out-of-state, like these Massachusetts companies who want to dump their trash here in New Hampshire? Like, what's the story on that?
Well, they want to build a landfill up in the North Country, and there are people who are calling themselves the water warriors. People like John Swan, Wendy. Why am I blanking on Wendy Thomas? I almost wanted to call her Wendy McWilliams. I'm sorry, Wendy, if you're watching this. There are people up there in the North Country and Littleton and others who are trying to save the Forest Lake. And we, in the legislature, I think this has been dealt with for about the last 6 years, going back and forth on the permitting process as to whether or not they're going to be allowed to permit this landfill that's there. This issue, we are importing a ton of trash here into this state, more than we create. And as a result, these companies need to build more landfills. That does not mean that we should put those landfills here in the North Country to destroy the Forest Lake. And people like John Swan, they call themselves water warriors because they have been out there on their own dime, on their own time, wading in the water, testing it, and proving that this water has cancerous chemicals inside of it. And people are swimming and people are drinking this. I mean, this is a terrible situation that is being caused by corporate negligence. And when I talk about corporations running our state, or corporations having a undue influence over the government as a whole, however you want to put it, that is what I'm talking about, where these corporations have so much power in the administrative agencies, the Department of Environmental Services, that this year when we had that legislation, SB 60, they were able to have their lobbyist tell the legislators what that legislation is going to look like. They had veto power over the legislation. So we were having conversations about it, we as in the members on the Environment and Agricultural Committee, like my good friend Kelly Potenza and Nick Germana. I mean, this was a bipartisan coalition of legislators who don't want their state destroyed by corporations. These legislators, not all of them even lived in the North Country. This does have nothing to do with the region. We all love the state of New Hampshire, and we know that if we continue to let this happen to our state, as it's happened with St. Gobain down in southern New Hampshire, or as it's happening now in the North Country, then this is going to continue to happen. And we're going to see our waterways and our reservoirs poisoned with cancerous chemicals. We're going to see our land and our soil poisoned with these chemicals, and we're going to be unable to grow, unable to drink, unable to breathe our air. And these Massachusetts companies, I'm not saying they're evil. They just want to make a buck. We, as the state, as the public entity, have to stand strong to make sure that, because they're naturally going to want to make a buck as the system is set up, as the economy is set up right now. There has to be an entity there that says, well, you can make a buck, but it's not by destroying the lakes and waterways of our state here in New Hampshire. And I don't, people are talking about bans on importing trash, and we're not talking about that. This is the people in the mainstream are not necessarily we're talking about protecting our environment and our culture here in the state of New Hampshire, and that means not importing an extraordinary amount of trash and destroying our lakes and our waterways just so that can happen. And I've been very passionate about that, even though I'm not on that committee, or I'm not in. I cannot claim that I have been involved in the in-depth work or fighting the lobbyists, or that is Kelly Potenza, that's Nick Germana, that's the people, that's John Swan, that's the people who are out there actually getting that work done. But I can proudly say that I spoke on the floor against Casella and against this legislation. I can proudly say that I stood up with John Swan, and I will stand hand in hand with him and the other legislators that are going to fight this tooth and nail, and anything else that any other company would try to do to destroy our environment and our health here in our state.
Oh, that's great. That reminds me of like 9-10 years ago when Kinder Morgan tried to get a pipeline going through our state, and kind of, I think, around Ringe and New Ipswich. And you saw people from all walks of life and affiliations coming together to stop that. And we did in fact stop it. So I think that's something all Granite Staters can really agree on, when it comes to our environment and, our natural resources and, the water and air. So that's a great issue to be passionate about. So if you are reelected, what's like one or two issues that you want to, maybe you didn't get to work on as much this time, or maybe you want to try and move it further down the line? What are a couple issues that you're hoping to work on in your next term if reelected?
Well, there are a lot of issues that I'm hoping to work on, but I mean, if I have to answer the priority issues, I'd say that we need to get cannabis legalization over the line. It's a justice issue, most importantly. To me, my cannabis annulments bill is the most critical piece to that legalization, where we have a system currently where people have to pay $300 in order to start the process. My legislation was taking away that charge and making it a proactive process in which we would go through and determine in our records who has a charge like this over the course of however long we've been arresting people for cannabis possession, and annulling them of that charge. I mean, people are kept from getting loans, kept from getting jobs, kept from going ahead in their life as a result of a cannabis charge that happened from possession of I mean, let's be clear, just a little joint or something like that 20, 30 years ago. I mean, people in opposition to this said, well, we don't really do that anymore. That's true. That is true. We don't do that anymore because we have an island of illegality and it's barely prosecuted anymore. But we did back in the day, and I might not have been there, but I know many people who were, and many people came to me saying that they have these charges that kept them from being able to get X, Y, or Z. That's unacceptable. That's immoral on the part of the state, and we need to get cannabis legalized because we shouldn't be arresting people, spending $150 a day, I think it's $64,000 a year, incarcerating them over a plant charge. I mean, especially when, in my opinion, drugs and addiction are a public health crisis and not a criminal justice one. People are addicted and they are moving towards addiction. They're depressed. They have anxiety. I mean, this world is tough. We live in a depressing world that leads people to addiction. in my opinion, we should not be addressing it in a surface level by arresting people who are going through that problem. We should be taking them in and helping them move forward and addressing the systemic issues which are leaving people in that depressive state where they get into the addictive state. Not that you get as addicted to cannabis or if it's as dangerous as the other drugs on Schedule 1, but we need to address cannabis legalization in the state. That's a really critical issue to me. I mean, the other critical issue is education, funding, and housing. And education funding, we talk about it all the time. We have an inequitable way that we fund education. I think everybody agrees with that. As a result, because our system has become so underfunded and strained by federal standards that I don't think helped at all, like the Bush years for education or things like that. No Child Left Behind, where we left behind every child in America. And those systems, people are criticizing them. Oh, we need to move to these systems. And I understand those criticisms. I think that we should be criticizing our public schools and how they're operating. But I don't think that means that we should be defunding our public schools or getting rid of that system. I think it's important that we have a place in which everybody in the community has a guaranteed spot to be able to get an education. In my opinion, that even though that I think it's failing in many systemic ways. I mean, I just went through it. I'm 21 years old. I graduated very recently, and in 2021, and I know I have my criticisms of the public school system, but I instead of getting rid of it, I think that we should boost it. I think that we should make it a place for education, and we should be teaching kids how to learn, not what to learn. We should be preparing them for what's going to be a new paradigm. This world's about to change in significant ways, with many things coming down the pike that are going to shift the paradigm in our world, similar to how the internet did, similar to how we saw other things do. And there's smarter people than I talking about that. And we're going to have to set up those systems, the public systems that allow for everybody, whether you're poor, whether you're disabled, whether doesn't matter. You can go to Conval or PES and get an education. We have to be setting up those systems, not just to spit people out with a degree that's going to allow them to get a job in this current job market, but set them up with a real education and a foundation to allow them to move forward as a human being and unlock their full potential as an American and a human being. And so that's a really critical issue to me. And I proposed legislation which raised the base adequacy amount to our students here, which addresses the funding piece of that, which I think is really critical. I mean, I grew up in Conval. We had property-rich district, good programs, good schools, good opportunity. The kids that came out of Conval probably came out 2 steps ahead of the kids that come out of Conant because of the lack of funding, the lack of programs, the lack of opportunity. And how many kids come out of Conant who are just as smart, just as capable as the kids in Conval, but have less opportunities because the Conval name, the opportunities, and the connections that people at Conval have as a result of their funding are so significantly greater than what happens 10 minutes down the road in Jaffrey.
Well, we went to Conant. So you're exactly right, man. The Conant kids would be sent to Conval for opportunities that we didn't have at Conant because we had subpar facilities. We didn't have the technological upgrades, and we didn't have the same programs. So I remember there was a spate of kids who would go over to
in the morning.
Yeah, Conval. Because when I was thinking about Conval when I was in high school, I thought about this like futuristic, place that had like a nice theater and sports programs. And I know you went there.
A team and a football team.
Yeah, and I actually did a short-term, long-term subbing gig for history at Conval.
Did you really?
It is a great school, but I mean, like all public schools, there's of course issues, and you spoke to those earlier. Yeah, I mean, I think we should be investing in education because I think a lot of the, just nationwide, I think a lot of the numbers are showing that, reading is down, comprehension is down, math is down, and especially COVID didn't help that at all. That set these poor children back probably a couple of years, especially with speech and development, and even just seeing who were the middle schoolers at the time making the transition over to high school. it's kind of staggering. So
It really is. And what happened to those kids in that period of time was, I mean, I technically was one of them. I mean, I guess I
right.
lost my senior year. I think I was mature enough to where it didn't particularly impact me as much as I saw it impact some of my peers, younger and older. And I mean, we have really done our kids wrong when, an eighth grader isn't able to comprehend a sentence in the United States of America in 2024. We've got a big problem. If people can't read today, then we are failing them. It's not a result of, they're stupid, they don't know how to do. No, that's a problem that's on us. That's on us as a government.
And teachers got to get support too. I mean, my mother's been in education for over 20 years in the public school system, and oftentimes teachers are spending money out of their own pocket for things. They're doing extra hours. They're having to combat parents. I mean, certain parents are obviously your kid's your number one priority, but these teachers are in there every day, 8 hours a day with these kids. And I just saw, just being at Conville briefly, the poverty for some children, and literally being at school. They otherwise wouldn't have anywhere to be because there's homelessness, there's poverty, obviously addiction issues at home. So it's something to see for sure, even here in a rural area.
Absolutely. And school should not be just a glorified childcare facility.
No.
That's just not what school in the United States of America has to be or should be at all. And you're right. Teachers absolutely need that support too. I mean, when I worked in the schools, we'd hear from teachers, we'd hear from paraprofessionals who had workloads that were just extraordinary. I mean, 15 kids for one person. How can you handle 15 special ed kids for one person on $12 an hour? I mean, that's insane. And these people are handling our future. They're handling our children, and we're treating them this way. I mean, God bless them for going out there and continuing to do that work. The only thing, and this is not my thought, this is what teachers said to me when we were doing the listening sessions with them when I used to do that work. The only thing holding the school system together right now is the passion of the teachers, that they are there. That's it. It's the fact that they're willing to buy their pencils and the supplies, the fact that they're willing to buy food for kids that are impoverished, extra food. That's it. Without their passion, if it was about the money for teachers, they would have left.
Yeah, they're not doing it to get rich. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, there's so many great people in education, and I did some subbing in the Conville district in the end of last year, early this year. And speaking to what Mike said, really great people in those buildings who show up every day, early every day, and are there for those kids. They're there because they care. They want to invest in this community. They think it's a worthwhile enterprise and endeavor. And, that is one big umbrage I have with like hardcore people on the right, and even some of my libertarian friends who just shit on public education nonstop and don't see any silver lining or anything good about it. So I urge people to go spend some time, whether it's subbing or volunteering or going in and actually seeing the nuts and bolts of the work that's done in education. And I think it will change perspectives. I think more resources and more funding, and I think just more awareness too, because a lot of people, like you said, they just think it's a glorified place of babysitting children, which it couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah, I think you put that absolutely well.
I never saw any kitty litter boxes too, by the way.
Neither have I.
That's such a.
But I hear about that.
Someone said it to me when I was up in Keene. And they didn't know that I had done some work there, and I was just thinking to myself, no, that's not true, And that goes for the left and the right, at the end of the day. And absolutely. I think the best way to counter that is to have conversations with people, and people you agree with and disagree with. So
the extremists
exactly
are it's one thing to have a position about charter schools or public education. We got to be able to talk about it. We got to be able to recognize that we live in a community, and we're all paying taxes, and we shouldn't. one side or the other isn't evil, especially when it's such a local issue like this. And we have to really find a way to build bridges with each other, because we're all Americans at the end of the day. And I think we all care about, if I had children, I care so deeply about those kids, and I want them to have the best education. And I would want the same for their friends and the other kids in the community.
Yeah, you can get. I mean, going to Conan, you kind of also get out what you put back in. I felt like I got a good education there and made some great connections, and I still to this day community, and still to this day I'm friends with several of the teachers that I had. In fact, Mr. Brock Lambert says hi to you, Jonah. He said he was your science teacher at Conval.
Yes, I love Brock Lambert.
Brock's been one of my best friends for many years, and we're playing music together, and so. That's he was a teacher at one point, But hey, they're just people too,
They really are.
When you grow up, you're looking at your teachers like, wow, they actually have to go out and buy food, and they do stuff.
You see them in the wild at Market Basket and Ringe.
Yeah, they do stuff outside of the school.
Can't look at them.
Yeah, exactly. So the other issue that came up in the debate was of course your I think it was one or two bills relating to firearms and your votes on that. What's the response you've kind of gotten on that as you run for re-election from the community?
People let me just say, those votes happened a year and a half ago, and people were aware of it at the time. I gave quotes to the media. I was open and honest about it in our local Democratic caucus meetings, local meetings everywhere. Anyone who emailed me, called me, or texted me got a response as to why I did what I did, because I absolutely understand what people are saying. I mean, you voted against a gun safety bill. When someone hears that, that's
right,
a reasonable thing to ask about. Absolutely, I think, because gun violence is a serious problem in our country. Violence is a serious problem in our country. And so people are seeing what's happening in Atlanta. They're seeing what's happening across the country every day, whether it be single-hand people, gang violence and violence in poor and low-income communities, or these horrific shootings where we're seeing 14-year-old teenagers who are isolated and alone, so much so that they have detached themselves from reality to the point where they're going to go out and murder their peers. That's horrific. And everybody understands why we want to address gun violence, and I absolutely do as well. And I did commit myself to that in 2022. Now, as a legislator, you are reading the text that comes before you and voting on that text, not the intent, not what's best for you in a primary campaign, not even your emotions, however strong, on a particular issue. Because the state statutes, especially when you're talking about throwing around Class A misdemeanors, criminal charges, removal of whether or not we agree with it, constitutional rights, those are serious things. And as a member of the Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee, if we're even going to breach that, it has to be properly written, properly enforced, properly set up. And the legislation that I voted against, HB 444, HB 106, I'm missing one, HB 444, HB 106, and HB 32. I believe I might be, I don't think I'm missing another one, but I might be. All of those apply to what I just said. Poorly written, unenforceable, or not properly set up. I understand the intent. When you're talking about red flags, no one who is absolutely a threat in the community should have a gun. I agree. And there is currently a system, Chapter 135-C, in the New Hampshire state statutes. If you see somebody who can't handle themselves, can't take care of themselves, is a threat to themselves or their community, you have the right to go to the court and request that that person be involuntarily committed, and as a result, that person loses their right to a weapon. Whether you're talking about the polling place legislation, I want to keep people safe at the polling places. They have a right to be safe from people threatening them with a firearm at the polling place. Right now, under state statute, brandishing a firearm is illegal. Threatening is illegal. There are police at polling places. If you see someone doing either of those things, then you go to the police officer and you tell them to enforce that law. Whether it comes to keeping schools safe, I think that legislation should have just been one or two lines prohibiting guns solely on school grounds. And it got too convoluted, wasn't properly enforceable. I agree that we shouldn't be having guns in schools. That legislation was not properly enforceable. And, Mike and Eric, it would have really been easy for me to just say, yeah, but I could just not bring this up. And I wanted to. I tried everything to be able to do that. I brought it up in caucus, asked if we could amend, tried to talk about it with people to alleviate my concerns. Nobody alleviated my concerns. I confirmed through conversations with an extraordinary amount of people over the course of the time that we had those bills, from the time that we had gotten the bills that were assigned to our committee in January to the time that we actually heard them in February of 2023. I was deliberating over them very carefully. And at the end of the day, after being told when I asked to amend them that we had to throw spaghetti on the wall, that these bills had come up time and time again over the course of 6 biennium, and doesn't matter because we had worked on them over the course of the last 6 biennium and it's as written as it could be, yada, yada. I mean, horrible stuff. I said, okay, I'm voting against it. There were 2 other members of my committee who were going to do the same. When they heard that, they threatened us with removal from committee. And
Wow.
as a result, those other 2 members caved and voted with the party in committee. I did not. And luckily, I have a good caucus leader who, even though we disagreed on those 3 votes, knew that I was an important member of the committee, knew that I had a right to disagree with the caucus on votes
Exactly.
when they come to our committee, and protected me from being removed. And I'm so grateful to Linda Harriet Gothright for doing that, because I would have been on no committee or environment or in agriculture for the last 2 years as a result. I mean, this is one of the first votes that we took. And I voted for, I also have to say, that same day, background check legislation, which expanded the background checks here in our state to strengthen that law, properly written, well enforced. Peter Leishman was the co-sponsor of that legislation. That was HB 59. I supported legislation to expand negligent safe storage laws, which was, I thought, properly written, and it did that at the time. And we got 1711 across the House floor, which expanded data transfer laws between when you are involuntarily committed, you lose your gun rights. Right now, we would transfer that data to the NICS database, and 1711 transferred that data to the NICS database to allow it to expand the data, and so the police knew who shouldn't have their gun rights. Like I told people at the debate, I support gun safety. I did a job as a legislator to vote on legislation that was before me. I was told that we had to throw spaghetti on the wall. I stand behind deliberating on legislation as opposed to spaghetti on the wall as a legislative strategy.
And with the storage and safety, that kind of speaks to, you mentioned this recent shooting. It feels like there's a shooting every week, which there pretty much is every week, every other week. So that would be like fall back to the parents for not properly handling or storing their firearms, and the children are able to get access to them. That's
Yes.
what that law would kind of pertain to. Because every time this happens, it's always like, well, how can we prevent this? How can we stop this? And some people say it's the guns. Other people say it's mental illness. It's possible drugs they could be taking. It's bullying, cyberbullying now, which is a more recent phenomenon in the last decade and a half with younger children, which I think is a real thing. It's certainly an issue that people are very fired up about. And but I appreciate you saying, New Hampshire gun owners have a right to have their firearms, and you're not trying to take away anyone's firearms, but trying to look at it through the lens of how do we stop, more of these mass shootings, because it just seems like in America we've kind of become complacent and just kind of accept it and look at the next news story and kind of move on from there, and it just keeps happening over and over again.
Absolutely. I think there are some major systemic issues that are causing people to detach themselves from reality to the point where they're going out and doing this, because
Yeah.
this is a phenomenon that is new.
I
So
mean,
it's
Columbine was kind of our generation's first, big kind of school shooting that we all remember. I mean, I know, school shootings have happened in history, but I agree. I think this is in America. This is a
frequency.
more,
Yeah, the frequency of it is just
yeah,
so, yeah.
yeah. I think that the culture has something to do with it, and desensitizing ourselves and younger people to violence. And I don't just blame video games or violent films, but when you watch that stuff, you just kind of, as entertainment, right? It kind of just seeps into your consciousness, and it's like, oh, if I get shot or I shoot someone, I could just put some health on it, or I could live. But
Yeah, I
people
don't
don't.
want to be Nancy Reagan, but I agree with you that I think that if you're an 8-year-old and you're watching Game of Thrones, I think that has to trigger something in your brain, which isn't necessarily that good.
Right, it does something. But I mean, I certainly grew up with violent video games and films, and
Yeah, me too. I think I'm
So
okay.
yeah, and in New Hampshire, I would say probably in the whole country, we are number one, or probably in the top three of gun ownership. I mean, most of my
I
good
think so.
friends own many firearms, and they're very responsible, and they're hunters, or they're former military, or current military, or they're just passionate about the sport. So I just appreciate your tenor with it, and the ability to try and speak soberly, and really address it, not in a cartoonish way, which I feel like on the national stage, that's what it's kind of become. It's become very cartoonish, and it's very charged up, and you got people who think we need to completely melt down and get rid of all the guns on one side, and then you got the NRA side that are just like, well, I want a bazooka on every corner. So it's like regular people can, I think, meet in the middle.
It gets back to the same thing, the extremes, and we have to
Yeah.
be able to move past that. And I think you and Eric recognize this well. I know you do as independent journalists, that cable news has a lot to do with this, in terms of the passion and how that passion manifests in people. When Walter Cronkite was what everyone watched, and it was moderated, or this is what the news is, people were able to have conversations. We had a baseline of truth, and I that's good in some ways, bad in others. I think we have to find a way to have this age of information where there are so many different voices, so many different perspectives, but still able to build those bridges and talk to one another. Like, let's not silo ourselves on these. Let's bring us together. And there's platforms like Two Way. Mark Halperin runs a Two Way platform where he has his show, and they speak really. I think it's Sean Spicer and Tim Hogan. So you got Trump and Hillary staffers, and then Mark Halperin in the middle, and you got
nice.
There's a good conversation of people that he brings online, and it's stuff like that. Stuff like your show, independent media, that I think are really going to help us move forward in this conversation, because we can't allow the extremes, whether it's gun rights or any other issue, to supersede genuine progress in getting the United States into
that word you use, Jonah, siloed, is 100% accurate, and that's what it is in so many segments and parts of our society. People are siloed off by ideology, by the media that they consume, by the culture, all of that. And these people that cater to niche media ecosystems are incentivized to pour gasoline on it, and keep it incendiary, and keep it up at 10 all the time. And people are sick of that. I think I know I am. That's one of the reasons I do the show. Mike and we've been doing this podcast, 8 years, Mike?
9 years.
9 years. And we just never like to play into that sensationalism and, pinning people against each other. So I feel hopeful. I'm on Twitter X every day, and it's hard to feel hopeful there, but there are actually other people out there who kind of feel the way we do, and want to see good information, and want to see healthy, respectful discourse on the issues that impact all of our lives.
Absolutely. I think people are craving it right now, and the cable news, like you said, it's entertainment. It's entertainment, and maybe that's good on some level. If you're a Politico, I like to sometimes watch.
Well, we consume it, yeah.
All three of us know that we've sometimes sat down together and watched all four cable news channels at the same time. But so I like cable news at some level for genuine entertainment purposes, but people that
just to see what the clowns are saying, all the
but
all the
it's also
but
frightening
everything
though,
being breaking news. I'm sick of that. I mean, we have to stop.
Yeah.
It's too much.
Yeah, but also that can still, that propaganda and that bullshit can still consume people's minds and actually mold their worldview is still very frightening. So that's where I think independent media and podcasts. I mean, this 2024 election, in my opinion, has been the podcast election. I mean, now we're my boy Bobby Kennedy really just hit the podcast hard, and now you're seeing Trump is going on shows that in the last cycle he didn't do any of them, and you're seeing it go more in that direction, which I like.
Yeah, you bring up the Kennedys. I mean, I think of when, as if I was there, I think of how I've read about how John used television as it's, was the new, and he effectively was able to capture that and use the new medium of television, the visual medium, to connect with the voter that they had never seen before. That first TV debate, those first TV jingle commercials that really were impacting people in a serious way. It's we're in a similar moment like that where podcasting, the internet. I mean, you can see it starting with the way that campaigns in 2008 used the internet and campaigns in 2016, but it's sort of reaching a fever pitch now where the culture has sort of found its balance and how the internet fits into it, and there are now voices that have more influence than the traditional media sphere on places like YouTube or Spotify or Twitter, X, or any of the other platforms that are out there. And I think a politician would be stupid not to engage with that,
right?
Because there are so many people that are out there that speak to that are tired of the 20-minute long soundbite conversations that politicians have been having for the last 40 years, and they're looking for long form conversations with genuine thoughts, a genuine vision. Not even if we agree all the time, but just to hear people be human, And you see, even with someone like Hillary Clinton, so hated, but she goes on Howard Stern and the comments 24/7. I mean, most all the comments. I was a Trump supporter, still am, but I actually kind of see the human side of Hillary now.
Exactly.
When you sit down for 3 hours, you actually get to kind of see a person. So.
Yeah, you can't hide by just the sound bites and corporate media. And I mean, Trump did that Twitter space with Elon, and that thing was, I don't even know how many tens of millions.
It had a billion. It actually had 1 billion listens and views, believe it or not. My people tell me.
Wow.
It had 1 billion.
That's doing circles around legacy Mockingbird media.
Yeah, I mean, what does CNN get these days? It's
yeah.
So, Representative Wheeler, do you have a prediction for the election? What do you think is going to happen? Let's go into political mode here.
Let's go into punditry.
Punditry.
I predict that in a little over 48 hours that I will win my re-election campaign and go back to the State House. And
yes.
I predict that we'll have a lot of good people in the State House next year that are going to fight really hard for the people here in the state of New Hampshire, whether that be for the budget on the Finance Committee, our environment and our water on the Environment and Agricultural Committee, our criminal justice system, and making sure that it's just for all people on the Criminal Justice Committee, our election system, making sure it's free and fair on the Election Law Committee. I'm very much so looking forward to being a part of the fight to make sure that we have decent, solid, true leadership at the legislative level here in the state of New Hampshire that's picking people for committees based off of merit and not political acumen, that's genuinely working for the people of the state of New Hampshire. And if we can win anything, let it be the State House, so that we can have a good speaker, good committee chairs, good committee members, a legislative body that's working, no matter the ideology, no matter your position, together for the people of the state of New Hampshire. And when it comes to the presidential election, ask me again in October. Ask me October 31st. Maybe I'll have an answer for you. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe we can do an election special just before. We'll do we'll do a Royal Rumble. We'll have like a dozen people on.
We'll get Chris on here.
We'll get D. Loretta. We'll get Corey Lewandowski. We'll get Matt Gaetz. We'll get maybe Hulk Hogan.
Hulk Hogan.
Yeah. We'll have your bag of people. Yeah, that would be something.
Yeah, and everyone listening, I want to urge you to go to Jonah's website. It's jonahwheeler.com. He's got a great video on there and more information about his background and his time in public life and serving. And I'm personally endorsing his reelection campaign. I want everyone who lives in Peterborough and Sharon, go out there on Tuesday and September 10th and vote for Jonah Wheeler. It's been awesome watching you, the last couple of years, man. I was real excited to vote for you last time. And, I thought about it to myself. I'm like, God, this guy, he was born when the Iraq War happened. And then Mike and I were in high school and we were fired up about politics and we were anti-war and speaking out against it. And then, to see you, a young guy like you, coming along and doing this and being involved and actually giving a damn and being up on all the issues and representing everyday people because you're just a regular guy is very encouraging and inspiring. So
inspiring, big time.
It's inspiring, man. So I appreciate everything you do, Jonah, and I want everyone to check out Jonah and some of the cool things he's done in the State House, and that the future is bright. There are still a lot of people who care and who are involved. So don't be black-pilled, be white-pilled, and be hopeful and encouraged by someone like Jonah, which I certainly am.
Thank you so much, Eric. I'm really grateful for that. And we got to be a little gray-pilled, It's okay to be a little black-pilled.
We got a little honk-pilled, too.
Clown-pilled.
Yeah. We gotta be unburdened by what has been, and we have to stand strong. No, I'm just kidding.
Dude, let's go, man.
That was his Kamabla impression.
But I really appreciate it. I mean, I have the strength to do what I do in the legislature because this community, Peterborough, Sharon, is so great. I grew up here. You mentioned the Iraq War. I was born 16 days before Bush went out on the podium and said,
wow,
bombing the shit out of Iraq, and we're going to shock and awe them to death and destroy Mesopotamia, essentially, and religious artifacts of the world and a million people. And I feel that every day. I know why I'm here for this moment, at least right now. We have to save the United States of America, our Constitution, what it means to the people here. We have to be willing to, especially people in office, lay down our colloquial life for this country. If you're genuinely out there saying you care about this country, nothing else matters than especially in this moment, working as hard as you can to save it. So I really appreciate, it's been tremendous. It's not just me. It's you two guys. It's Chris. It's Zoe. It's all the people in town. Stephanie Hurley, Sharon Monahan. If I kept naming, I'd forget. Kath Allen. I'm going to forget a million people. There have been so many people. Nancy Roberts that have been so helpful. Carol Krause. I can keep going. Just this town has allowed a 19, 20, 21-year-old to go out there and actually fight for them and the people. And the same can be said for all of those towns that have allowed the same for whether they be 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80-year-olds who really genuinely care about the people to go to the legislature and fight back. And so thank you for letting me be on your show. And I'm really appreciative for your endorsement. And we'll see what happens next Tuesday.
Hell yeah.
And I endorse too, by the way. I am Donald J. Trump and officially endorsing Jonah Wheeler.
I don't know if that helps, but
I Mike Jackman actually am endorsing. Sorry, I got a little. But yeah, no. As an independent man, it's an honor to vote for you the first time. It'll be an honor to vote for you again on Tuesday the 10th. And I think you have it in the bag, Jonah. I do. I really do. But we don't take anything for granted. So
I think if treated fairly,
down exactly. You can never take anything for granted.
I think if treated fairly, you could win the whole thing. You could win the whole thing.
I lose, it's free, right?
Yeah.
If I lose, it will not be my fault. If I win, I will claim victory for everything.
And then we'll storm Harlow's. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you lose, we're going to storm Harlow's.
Storm Harlow's, yes.
or the town. We're going to storm the town hall if you lose.
Yeah, the center, the community center where we do the voting.
That's the armory, right?
That's just a joke, guys. To any boomers listening, we're not really going to do that.
No, I'm going to get in trouble. You guys are going to get me in trouble.
Yeah, we're going to get Jonah in all kinds of hot water, Mike.
Oh, man. Well, thanks again for coming on. We really appreciate it. And, guys,
thank you.
Representative Wheeler is accessible. He'll talk to anybody. He'll take your questions. Like, we've seen it in action. And
he listens.
Let's send him back to continue the work.
That's something.
Contact information's on the website. Yeah.
Yep, I put all the links down below. Jonah's Twitter X account, his website. He's on the Instagram, which is great. He's got a great account on Instagram. Some great pictures with Marion Williamson, who's a very good.
We love our young people.
Yeah, we do. We love the young people, Jonah. And he's got great pictures with Marion Williamson. She's a very good friend of Jonah's. She's a very good friend of the New Hampshire primary.
She does crystal. She does crystals.
We love Marion.
We do love Marion.
What's funny, I've been to her house. I didn't see single crystal there.
Well, she had him at the other house.
Oh yeah, right. She has a house specifically for the crystals, we're told.
Yeah, she's awesome. That's the beauty of our primary here in our state, and that's another knock against the DNC messing with that. Just being able to become friendly and friends with national figures like that. And have them here in our state, and we're going to keep fighting for that and supporting that, definitely with our show.
We're going to keep that strong.
Yeah,
we need to be able to talk to our people who are going to be president of the United States as human beings. Any other state, they can just blast it with ad campaigns.
Exactly. Yep, they come in on the tarmac, they wave, they do a rally, then they're gone. Here in New Hampshire, man, they get to know you on our first day. They're going to come to your birthday party. Like us.
We got to meet him 7 times before we're willing to vote with him.
Right, exactly. So, yeah, we'll keep at that. Well, everyone listening, thank you, for tuning in to Jackman Radio. And to support this show, if you like what we do, it is independent. We don't have any of that tenant Russia money. We heard about that with Tim Pool and Dave Rubin. Boy, what a disaster. They were getting paid by Russia. They didn't even know it. We are not paid by Russia. Although, Putin, if you're listening, I'll give you my checking account information. Or I'll give you my Venmo. We are funded by viewers and listeners like you listening right now and watching. And we use patreon.com/Jackman Radio. Become a patron, $5, $10, $15, $20 a month if you like what we do to support us and keep us going and booking cool and interesting guests like Jonah Wheeler, like Jesse Ventura, like Roger Stone, like Tulsi Gabbard, like RFK Jr. We've all done it because of our supporters and our listeners. So we really appreciate it. And we hope you all have a great day, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you.